Hello everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to share with you our focus for this session. We'll be exploring your student's book, specifically pages 190 to 191. The main topic is Mega Goal 3.1, Unit 12, titled Lost and Found. We'll look at the form, meaning, and function related to this unit. Over the next few minutes, we'll go through key concepts, activities, and tips to help you understand and teach this material effectively. Let's get started. Let's take a closer look at how we talk about past results with conditional sentences. When we use a conditional in the past, we're often referring to things that didn't happen, but if they had, they would have led to a certain result. For example, if you had called me, I would have come. Here, we're imagining a past situation that didn't occur, but if it had, the result would have been different. Notice that we use the past perfect, which is had plus the past participle, in the if clause. And in the main clause, we use would have plus the past participle. This structure helps us talk about unreal past situations and their possible outcomes. This is especially useful when we want to reflect on things we could have done differently or missed opportunities in the past. So, whenever you're discussing past possibilities or regrets, this conditional structure is the way to go. It connects past situations with their hypothetical results, making your communication clearer and more nuanced. Let's take a closer look at the note on this slide. We can see that instead of using was in all persons, we can use were. This is especially useful in conditional sentences or hypothetical situations. Next, we have the phrase as if or as though combined with the past perfect tense, which is had plus VPP. This structure helps us describe unreal situations in the past. For example, he seems as though he hadn't slept for days. It gives the impression that something didn't happen or was different from reality. Similarly, as if and as though can be used with the past simple tense to talk about unreal or imaginary situations in the present or future. Looking at the example, he looks as if he were rich, shows that we're imagining or pretending that he is rich, even if he's not. This use of were instead of was is a kind of subjunctive mood, which is common in these unreal or hypothetical contexts. We also see that she talks as if she knew everything, but of course, she doesn't. This highlights how these expressions can convey that someone is acting as if something were true, even when it's not. So, to sum up, as if and as though are really useful tools for expressing unreal situations, whether in the past with the past perfect or in the present with the past simple. They help us make our descriptions more vivid and nuanced. Now is the time to take action. Something should be done, and honestly, it's a little late. When we talk about the past, we often use the simple past tense, but sometimes we want to express that it's really overdue. For example, imagine Ali is a great talker, but it's about time he actually did something instead of just talking. These expressions, it's high time or it's about time, make the criticism stronger because they emphasize that action is long overdue. We use it's high time or it's about time plus the past simple to highlight this sense of urgency. For instance, you might say, it's high time the children were in bed, especially since it's well past their bedtime. Or, it's about time we were leaving, meaning we should have left earlier. Other examples include, it's time you had a haircut, or it's high time you got a job, addressing situations where someone should have taken action long ago. And finally, it's time we went home, implying that the moment to go home has already passed. Remember, these expressions are especially useful when talking about unreal or hypothetical situations in the past, emphasizing that something should have happened earlier. So, using it's high time or it's about time really strengthens your criticism and underscores the delay. All right, let's take a closer look at this slide. We have the sentence, he looks as if he knew the answer. Now, notice that the verb knew is in the past tense. This is an example of how we use the past tense in a clause that describes a present situation, which can sometimes be a bit tricky. The key point here is understanding the difference between the present and past forms when using looks as if. When we say, he looks as if he knew the answer, we're implying that, based on his appearance, we think he might already know the answer, even if he doesn't actually know it right now. Now the slide asks us to change the verb into the past, but in this case, the sentence is already in a past tense form. The original sentence on the slide seems to be, he looks as if he know the answer, which is incorrect because know is in the present tense. The correct past tense form for that sentence is knew. This is a common mistake, and it ties into the broader theme of understanding how to properly use verb tenses in conditional or hypothetical statements. Recognizing when to use the past tense in these contexts is vital for clear, accurate communication. And finally, the find the fib part is a fun way to test whether you've grasped this concept. It encourages you to spot the incorrect sentence and correct it, in this case, changing know to knew. So remember, when you're describing something that appears to be in the past or hypothetical, using the correct past tense is essential. It helps convey the right meaning and keeps your language precise. All right, now we're at a really interesting point in our lesson. The slide says, "It's time you told me the truth." But of course, in English, when we're talking about the past, we need to change that verb. So instead of told, it becomes told in the past tense. And the key here is understanding how to correctly convert present tense into past tense, especially with irregular verbs like tell. Next, it says, we have to change the verb into past. This is a reminder that tense consistency is crucial in clear communication. If we're referring to something that happened before now, we need to use the past tense. Then the slide presents a similar sentence. It's time you tell me the truth. Notice how that's in the present tense. To be grammatically correct in the past, it would change to, it's time you told me the truth. This shift is important because it reflects the timing of the action. Finally, the slide says, find the fib. This is a fun way to reinforce our understanding. It's a little game, spot the mistake or the inconsistency in the sentences. By doing this, we're practicing how to identify correct and incorrect tense usage, which is essential for effective communication. Throughout this, remember that mastering tense changes helps us tell stories more accurately and understand others better. So, keep an eye out for these subtle shifts. They're key to becoming more fluent and precise in your English. All right, let's look at this sentence. If I had played better, I would have won. Now, notice here that after would have, we have the base form of the verb win. But in correct grammar, when we're using the perfect conditional, we need to use the past participle. So the correct sentence should be, I would have won. This is an important point because it highlights how the verb form changes in conditional sentences. Specifically, the third conditional, when we're talking about things that didn't happen in the past but are imagined differently. Now, in the incorrect example, if I had played better, I would have win. The verb win is in its base form, which is a common mistake. The correct form is won, the past participle of win. So the key takeaway here is, whenever you're constructing third conditional sentences, remember that after would have, the verb must be in the past participle form. This structure helps us express regret or hypothetical situations about the past accurately. And as we connect this to the overall theme, it's about mastering the correct verb forms to communicate clearly and accurately, especially when discussing unreal past situations. Now, let's see if you can spot the mistake and find the fib in this example. Rarely do we find such talent. This phrase highlights just how exceptional this individual is. When we say, rarely do we find, we're using an inverted sentence structure, which is a bit more formal and emphasizes the rarity. It's a great example of how changing the usual word order can add emphasis and variety to our language. Remember, inverting the sentence involves placing the adverb like rarely at the beginning, followed by do, and then the subject. This structure is often used to highlight the rarity or unusual nature of something. So, in the context of our overall theme, which is about recognizing outstanding talent, this phrase helps us underscore just how exceptional such talent is, something that's hard to come by. Today, I want to focus on a common scenario that many of us can relate to. Sometimes, an employee takes a day off from work and this can have various implications. For example, when she has been upset, it's often because of personal or work-related stress. In such cases, the boss may notice that she's been distant or less engaged. When she takes a day off, it's usually a necessary step to recover and regain her balance. Interestingly, the phrase, "she has been upset," highlights how emotional well-being impacts work performance and interactions. Now, if we look at the phrase, "the boss has," it reminds us that leaders need to be aware of these emotional cues and respond thoughtfully. Moving to the phrase, "logic lineups," this suggests that there are often logical sequences or patterns in how employees behave or respond to certain situations. And seldom is a word that indicates these emotional outbursts or absences are not frequent, but they do happen. Finally, the idea that seldom has so upset been emphasizes that extreme upset or distress is rare. But when it does occur, it's important for managers and colleagues to understand and handle it appropriately. Overall, this slide underscores the importance of recognizing emotional cues and understanding that such moments, though infrequent, require sensitivity and proper management within the workplace. You know, sometimes I find myself feeling really happy, like I have this genuine smile on my face. It's funny because when I think about it, I've never really experienced that kind of consistent happiness before. And that's where the concept of logic lineups comes into play. It's about understanding how our thoughts and routines line up to create these moments of joy. But then again, there are times when he rarely smiles. It's interesting, isn't it? How different people respond differently to the same situation. This contrast really highlights the importance of recognizing individual patterns and behaviors. So the key takeaway here is that our emotional responses, whether happiness or the lack of it, are often shaped by these underlying routines and thought processes. And by being aware of these, we can work towards more consistent positive experiences, aligning our actions with the kind of happiness we want to achieve. All right, now let's look at this interesting point about sentence structure. The slide shows the sentence, "Never have I seen such a storm." This is an example of an inversion, which is common in English when forming questions or emphasizing something. Typically, in standard statements, we say, "I have never seen such a storm." But notice how, in this case, we switch the order to "never have I seen such a storm." This inversion places emphasis on never, giving it a stronger impact. Now, the slide also presents an incorrect version. "Never I have seen such a storm." This version is not correct in standard English because it doesn't follow the proper inversion rule after negative adverbs like never. The key takeaway here is that when we start a sentence with certain negative adverbs such as never, we need to invert the auxiliary verb and the subject. So, have I seen becomes have I seen, but with never at the beginning, it turns into never have I seen. Finally, the slide challenges us to find the fib among these examples, highlighting the importance of understanding proper sentence structures for clear and effective communication. This concept ties back to our overall theme of mastering language nuances to enhance our speaking and writing skills. So let's look at this sentence. "No sooner had the train arrived than it left again." This is a classic example of a structure we use to show that one event happened immediately after another. Notice that we need to include had before the subject the train, making it had the train arrived. That's because we're using the past perfect tense here to emphasize the sequence of events. Now compare that to the sentence on the slide. "No sooner the train arrived than it left again." This version is actually incorrect because it's missing the auxiliary had. Without had, the sentence doesn't follow the correct grammatical structure for this kind of expression. The key takeaway is that when you're using no sooner, then, in past perfect constructions, always remember to include had right before the subject. This not only makes your sentence grammatically correct, but also clearly shows the sequence of events. And finally, I want to challenge you to find the fib here, meaning, identify which part might be incorrect or misleading. It's a good way to reinforce your understanding of this structure.